Very nice. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala abdillahi wa rasulih. Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. So first of all, I would like to begin by praising Allah. And I would like to begin by asking Allah to exalt the mention and grant peace to our Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and to his family and his companions. I would also like to extend my thanks and gratitude to all of the organizers, the administration of the masjid, who facilitated this event to take place in such a beautiful masjid. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to place it heavy on the scale of their good deeds Yawm al-Qiyamah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this masjid a place which is blessed, a place where Allah's tranquility descends and the angels surround it and mercy covers the people within it, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions them in a gathering that is better than the gathering that they are in. Our topic today is a really beautiful topic. We're going to be talking about, it's difficult to maybe even find the right summary for it, but we're going to be talking about al-madahib al-fiqhiyah. The madahib, the madhab, as it relates to fiqh. Now it's very important that we call this al-madahib al-fiqhiyah, because what we're not here to talk about today is al-madahib al-aqadiyah, the different ways and the different means and the different beliefs that people have as it relates to aqeedah and iman. That's not our discussion today at all. Today we came to talk about al-furu' al-fiqhiyah, the branches of the religion as it relates to fiqh. And we came to talk about a number of things. We want to talk about tarikh al-madhhab, where did the madhhab come in history, or what we might call tatawwur al-madahib, how the madhhab developed over history. Some of the scholars call it tarikh al-tashri', the history of Islamic legislation and law, and where that Islamic legislation and law came from. We also want to talk about how a person learns a madhab. And in this you must forgive me, because I'm a mix here, right here. I'm a strange mix. When I started studying Islam, I started studying it upon the madhab of Imam Ahmad. Not really out of choice, although it's an excellent madhab to study, but just because that was what was available for my teachers. So we took Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat and these books in the madhab of Imam Ahmad, Zad al-Mustaqni' and these books. Then I started teaching in al-Madrasat al-Umariyah. We went on the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i. So all that I'm going to gather for you for the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i, I took it from Shaykh Abdul Rahman. So not that I'm blaming Shaykh if I say something wrong, it's my fault, but I took it from him because he grew up in the madhab, studying the madhab and memorizing the books of the madhab and teaching the madhab. So from him I took some discussion about al-madhab al-Shafi'i. As for the Hanafi madhab, which I think is important for us to talk about because it's very popular here in South Africa, I went to research some of the books and the way people study the madhab. I researched it for myself, so I'm not going to say to you I'm not an authority on the madhab, but we took some of the most famous books that are studied in the madhab just to present to you how a person studies, because as we're going to talk about later on today inshaAllah ta'ala, al-hukmu ala al-shay far'un an tasawwurih. This is very important, wallahi ikhwani. This is something that I'm going to give you as a principle. If you want just to kind of say, okay, today I'm a bit tired, I'm going to switch off. I'm going to really give you basically two things. If you take these two things as general principles, everything I'm going to say is going to fall under these two things. The first, al-hukmu ala shay far'un an tasawwurih. You can't issue a ruling for something until you understand what the thing you're issuing a ruling for is. For so many people, I see them arguing about al-madahib al-fiqhiyya, and the person has tasawwurun, a tasawwur which is false, khati', or even we can say tasawwurun batil, a completely false understanding of what the madhab is. So someone comes and says, haram alayk, haram, you cannot take a madhab. The other one comes and says, fardu ayn upon you. Like they said to me when I first became Muslim, they said, Ya akhi, nashukku fi imanik, we doubt your iman. I said, why, what did I do? They said, which madhab are you? The problem, all of this discussion is al-khata' fi tasawwur al-madhab. They don't have an understanding of what the madhab fiqhi is at all. So this one is arguing about something, his understanding of the madhab is completely wrong, and he has no tasawwur of what a madhab fiqhi is. And the other one also has no proper tasawwur of what the madhab fiqhi is. And that's why sometimes you might find, and we talk about this later, you might find that a person argues with you over something which really is, and we're going to cover this is a nice mas'ala later on. Can an ordinary person, or I'm not going to say cancer, it's wrong. I'm going to say, to what extent can an ordinary person, a non-learned person, follow a madhab? Of course, intisab we agree. And anyone can say, Muhammad Tim al-Hanafi, Muhammad Tim al-Maliki, Muhammad Tim al-Shafi'i, Muhammad Tim al-Hanbali. And intisab, yes. But where might the layman actually struggle? As an example, someone comes and says, I am Abdullah al-Shafi'i. Hayyak Allah ya Abdullah. It's lovely to meet you. Ya Abdullah, could you tell me one book that you have taken in the Shafi'i madhab? At least you took one book, right? At least you have one single source, Matan Abi Shuja'. At least you have one single source of the madhab. What do you mean? For the point is that a lot of people argue about things in this issue because basically they don't understand at all what the madhab is, or how to use it, or how to benefit from it, or they don't understand some of the masail within it. So they might confuse, for example, the issues of taqleed with the issue of, for example, intisab, attributing yourself to the madhab, or they might confuse taqleed, which is in reality a darura for many people, a necessity for many people, versus what some people call a taqleed al-a'ma, any absolute blind following to the point the person says, don't tell me the hadith, ana ala madhabi, I'm on my madhab. And they might confuse this issue. I'm not talking about what the ruling, we haven't covered the hukm yet. We're just talking about tasawwur. The person is shouting at someone, Wallah haram alayk, you are muqallid, this is evil, it didn't come in the Quran, it didn't come in the Sunnah, and they're fighting about it. And the person aslan doesn't differentiate between the types of taqleed. He didn't understand what taqleed is, he doesn't understand what ijtihad is, he doesn't understand the marahil, the stages a person goes through in their understanding of fiqh. So they're arguing about something asalatan, they don't understand it. So the first qa'idah we're going to take is al-hukmu ala shay far'un an tasawwurih. Until you understand what we're talking about, you won't be able to judge what is allowed and what is not allowed. The second principle, and I'm going to make three, not two. The second principle that we're going to take is the principle that is mentioned in the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. We made you into a middle ummah. A lot of people, when they heard Muhammad Tim Al-Hanbali is going to come here to our half Hanafi, half Shafi'i town, and he's going to tell us that you have to be la madhabiyah. You're not allowed to have a madhab. And he's going to take you away from what your fathers used to worship. And he's going to change the deen that you were taught. And on the other side, and there is the other side, also some messages going out. This Muhammad Tim, I heard him praise Abu Yusuf al-Qadi. I heard him say something good about Abu Yusuf al-Qadi, Sahib Abi Hanifa, rahimahumullah ta'ala. I don't think this brother is upon the sunnah. We see what? Ifratun wa tafrit. Exaggeration and extremism on both sides. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Allah gave us the kitab and the sunnah for us to be neither extreme on one side nor on the other. That doesn't mean in every mas'ala you go in the middle. Should a woman wear niqab or not? Halfway. Nah, it's not like that, right? But that's a misunderstanding, right? Mafhumun khati'. It's a misunderstanding that the meaning of wasatiyya is in the middle of everything. It's not in the middle of everything. But what it means is to be just and to be fair and not to be extreme. Because the thing that destroyed the people who came before you is al-ghuluw fi ad-din, being extreme in the religion. And also in this, sometimes when people make statements, you also have to contextualize the statements they make. You have to put the statement in context of where it came from. Some people live in a situation where a particular madhab fiqhi is associated with a particular madhab aqadi. A particular madhab in fiqh, Shafi'iyya, in this city, all of them are ... on this aqidah, of this aqidah. So people then confuse the two and they start to talk about the fiqhi madhab, the madhab in fiqh, as though it's a madhab in aqidah. Oh, those people, they are, those Shafi'iyah, ضالون مضلون. They misguide themselves, they misguide other people. Akhi, you're talking about aqidah. You mixed al-madhab al-aqadi wal-madhab al-fiqhi. You start talking about someone's belief, it doesn't go with you. You didn't talk about the issue of fiqh. So we must be just and fair. Just and fair. And this brings me to my third point. I was going to include in the second one, but I'm going to make it a clear third point. That our goal, bil ijma'. Muhammad Tim says what? Bil ijma'. Consensus. That the goal of a Muslim is to attach themselves to the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the aqwal of the imma al-arba'ah, the four imams, on this topic is so much, it is mutawatira from them. It has been narrated from them from so many different people in so many different books, in so many different places, that the goal of the Muslim is to attach their heart to the Quran and the Sunnah. Now this doesn't mean I'm having a go at the madahib fiqhiyah. It doesn't have to be a madhab fiqhi. In anything that takes you, detaches you from the kitab and the sunnah, this is a problem. We are here to attach our hearts to the Quran and the sunnah. Allah Azza wa Jal didn't send down the Maliki madhab with Jibreel. He didn't. I'm going to vary the madahib here so it doesn't say, you kept saying Hanafi Shafi'i. He didn't send the Maliki madhab with Jibreel. He didn't. Allah Azza wa Jal sent down the book of Allah and the Sunnah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Taraktu fikum shay'ain." I left among you two things. You will not be misguided. لَن تَضِلُّوا بَعْدِي. You will not be misguided after me as long as you hold on to them. Kitab Allahi wa sunnati. The book of Allah and the Sunnah. And I think everyone knows But the madahib fiqhiyya by name are not mentioned in the Quran, nor are they mentioned in the Sunnah. Sometimes you find funny things like statements about Umar ibn al-Khattab, and in the footnotes it says, perhaps he took the view of Imam al-Shafi'i. Ya salam. How did Umar take the view of Imam al-Shafi'i? Sometimes you find things like this. They don't mean he took it from Shafi'i, but they mean he took the same, istidlal, the same idea he took. But it's funny, you see, لعل عمر, perhaps Umar, أخذ برأي الشافعي, took the opinion of Imam al-Shafi'i. This is somewhat impossible. The earliest of the 4 Imams died 150 after the Hijrah, right? Rahimahullah ta'ala. Up to, 250, whatever. So 150 to 250 years after the Hijrah, there was no, Umar never met لا أبا حنيفة ولا مالك ولا الشافعي ولا أحمد rahimahumullah ta'ala. So the point is, if we understand this issue nicely, we have a good tasawwur, and we are balanced in the sense we're just in the rulings of Islam, respectful to the scholars of Islam, but we're not shy to say that Allah Azza wa Jal sent down the Quran and the Sunnah. He didn't send down the Madahib al-Arba'ah. He sent down the Quran and the Sunnah. وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Add to that Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali radiyallahu anhum, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ. Stick to my sunnah, the sunnah of the Khulafa al-Rashideen. Those Khulafa al-Rashideen didn't know any madhab of Abi Hanifa, wala Malik, wala Shafi'i, wala Ahmad. So the point is here, we're going to be just. We're not going to take away from our ulama. We're not going to detract from them or to speak badly about them or to detract from the khidmah that they did for the ummah. And honestly, I believe when you finish studying the madahib fiqhiyya, you're going to say, مَا أَعْظَمَ هَذِهِ الْخِدْمَةِ. What an amazing service these people did for the ummah. And they did an amazing service to the ummah. We're not going to take away from that. But we're not going to be shy in attaching people's hearts to the Quran and the Sunnah. As did who? Who did we take this from? Did we invent this ourselves? We took it from Al-Imam Abi Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Malik, al-Shafi'i and Ahmad. All of them kept saying to go to the Kitab and the Sunnah. We're going to bring some of the statements that they said with regard to attaching your heart to the Quran and the Sunnah. So this is important. So a person now, in summary, who studies a madhab fiqhi, and they do so while attaching their heart to the Quran and the Sunnah, then this person, inshaAllah ta'ala, has done, I don't even say they haven't done wrong, they've done well. He's done a good job to study the madahib fiqhiyya, murattaba, bit-tadarruj, in order, in stages, by taking the different topics of within the wider topic of fiqh, like fiqh, usul al-fiqh, al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, al-furuq al-fiqhiyya, al-khilafiyat, all of these different topics we're going to talk about in fiqh. He takes them and he takes them from a curriculum that is murattaba, it's ordered, and it is bit-tadarruj. It starts him off easy, then a little bit more, little bit more, little bit more. He's done great. But his heart is attached to what? What does he crave for? What does he hope for? What is he dreaming of at night? He's attached to his heart to the Quran and the Sunnah. He wants to obey Allah and obey the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, ati'u Allah wa ati'u rasula wa ulil amri minkum. From the best of what is said about the word ulul amr is al-ulama wal-umara. They are the scholars and they are the leaders. Allah told us absolute obedience to Allah, absolute obedience to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As for the ulama and the umara, the leaders and the scholars, the obedience to them is fi daw'i ta'atin lillahi wa lirrasuli sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in the light of your obedience to Allah and to His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This is just a khulasa, like a little something just to get you started, so that the one who wants to run away, they can run, and the one who wants to stay, they can stay. But inshallah, yani this is the mukhtasar of what I want to share with you today. Khwani, let's talk very, very briefly. And the problem is, just my introduction to fiqh is like 24 hours long. No, that's really, it was 26 hours, something like that. So I'm gonna have to be like very summarized. The word fiqh, because we have to start with the tasawwur, right? We said before we understand the madhab, we have to have a tasawwur of what the madhab is. Somebody tell me what's a madhab. First of all, the madahib we're talking about are not to do with aqeedah, it's fiqh. So let's talk about fiqh. The first word, or the first meaning of the word fiqh, it is al-fahmu daqiq. It is to have detailed understanding. I don't like to say that it's just to have understanding. And some people say al-fiqh huwa al-fahm. That's true, but in Arabic the words are different, right? We need to have something a bit more. Yani what makes the difference between understanding and fiqh? Why don't we call it the madahib of understanding? Why do we say fiqh? Because fiqh is about deep understanding. Ibn Faris, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, الفاء والقاف والهاء أصل واحد صحيح يدل على إدراك الشيء والعلم به ثم he said first of all, he said these three letters, fa and qaf and ha, they are a single root which tells you about understanding something and having knowledge of it. He said ثم اختص بذلك علم الشريعة. He said then it became used specifically for the Sharia. It became used specifically for the Sharia. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, وَالْفِقْهُ أَخَصُّ مِنَ الْفَهْمِ وَهُوَ فَهْمُ مُرَادِ الْمُتَكَلِّمِ مِنْ كَلَامِهِ. Fiqh is more specific than understanding. It means knowing what the person who is speaking, knowing what they want. Others said, الْعِلْمُ الْمُؤَثِّرُ فِي النَّفْسِ الدَّافِعُ لِلْعَمَلِ. It's the knowledge that affects you and impels you to act. And the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayra yufaqihu fid din." This is hadith in Bukhari and Muslim from the hadith of Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu. Whoever Allah wants good for, He gives him fiqh, i.e. He gives him a detailed, deep understanding of the religion, or He gives him knowledge that he acts upon. Because that's, some of the scholars, they said the difference between understanding and fiqh is that fiqh is knowledge that you act upon. And fahm is just, you know, like I know it's halal, but I know it's haram, but I still do it. But they said that fiqh, it means to really understand it properly. And that's why I want to quote a statement from Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, إِنَّمَا الْفَقِيهِ الَّذِي أَنْطَقَتْهُ الْخَشْيَةِ وأسكتته الخشية وإذا قال بالكتاب والسنة وإن قال بالكتاب والسنة وإن سكت بالكتاب والسنة. He said the person who has fiqh, the faqih, is someone who the fear of Allah makes him speak and the fear of Allah makes him silent. When he speaks by the Quran and the Sunnah. And when he's silent because of the Quran and the Sunnah. And the Quran and Sunnah tell him to be silent. And if the matter becomes unclear to him, رَدَّهُ إِلَىٰ عَالِمِهِ, he brings it back to the person who knows it. And Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, مَعْرِفَةُ النَّفْسِ مَا لَهَا وَمَا عَلَيْهَا. Fiqh is to know yourself, what is counted for it and what is counted against it. We're going to come back to this because it is important. مَا لَهَا وَمَا عَلَيْهَا. This is a very important stage in fiqh. Knowing what is in your favor and what is against you. As for the sort of technical definition of fiqh, so we understand what it is, there are many definitions and we don't have time to take all of them, but we could say al-ilmu bi-ahkam al-shari'ah al-amaliyah al-muktasaba min adillatiha al-tafsiliyah. It is to know the rulings of the sharia that relate to actions. Practical rulings. Why practical rulings? What other rulings are there in the sharia that are not amaliyah, for example? Al-i'tiqad, for example. Issues of what you believe, your belief, iman, and things like that. Yes, you have to implement them and practice them, but these ahkam, they are ahkam al-sharia, and you could call them al-ilmiyah. And you have to know, what is required from you is to know them, like Allah's names and attributes. What is required from you, that's why some of the scholars, they called it Tawheed, At-Tawheed al-Ilmi, or they called it Tawheed al-Ma'rifati wal-Ithbat. The Tawheed of knowing Allah and affirming who Allah is. That what is required from you is knowledge. There are some things, ahkam in Islam, there are some rulings that are related to the actions you do. How you pray and how you make wudu, and your transactions with people. But where are these rulings taken from? They could be taken from two places. They could be taken from al-adillah al-ijmaliyah, if that's the right term for it. They could be taken from adillah ijmaliyah, evidences which are general and summarized. For example, al-amru yufidu al-wujub. Every command that comes in the Quran tells you that this thing is wajib. Allah said, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, perform the salah. You don't have to ask, is salah fard? Ask. Allah said, أَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, salah is fard. طيب, what kind of evidence is this? It's an evidence which is ijmaliyah, it's generic. It's like, it can be used for many ayat, it can be used for salah, it can be used for wudu, it can be used for many different things. It can be used for mu'amalat, transactions, marriage, divorce, and it's like a principle in nature, and it covers all types of legislative rulings. Mostly we study this in usul al-fiqh. Mostly we study this in usul al-fiqh, most of the time. What we're looking for in fiqh, in the madhab fiqhi, generally speaking, is we are looking at, if we're talking about al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, the branches of fiqh, we're looking at al-adillatu tafsiliyya, specific ayat on specific topics, specific hadith on specific topics. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم. O you who believe, when you stand up to pray, wash your faces. وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ, and your arms up to your elbows. وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ, and wipe over your heads. وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ, and wash your feet up to your ankles. Is this a generic evidence that's used in all areas of Sharia? No, it's a specific evidence that is used in what? In the issue of wudu, tahara. Maybe also you can bring it in the issue of salah. إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ, you have to stand up to pray. But generally this is tahara, salah is not something that's a principle you can apply to everything. So in general, and this is very summarized, it's not very detailed, it's not very, accurate in the sense of everything. But generally speaking, usul al-fiqh deals with the generic stuff, deals with the overriding principles. You can think of usul al-fiqh as a toolkit by which you extract rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah and any of the other evidences in Islam. As for al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, what we call the branches of fiqh, or we call it fiqh itself, We're dealing with specific issues in specific things. We're not dealing with aqeedah because we said al-ahkam al-amaliyas, or the madahib fiqhiyya have nothing to say about aqeedah generally speaking. The Islam, the sciences of Islam are mutadakhila, right? You can't separate and say, I'm only ever going to study fiqh and I'm never going to study usul fiqh. A'udhu billah. Never going to take it. And you can't do that because fiqh, in usul, everything goes together, right? You can't say, I'm going to study fiqh and I will never look at anything in the seerah. Because by default, you're going to come across things that are also in the seerah and you can't escape it. But in general, al-madahib al-fiqhiyya, they do not deal with masail al-i'tiqad. They don't deal with anything related to aqeedah. They deal with al-ahkam al-amaliyya, the practical legislative rulings. There are lots of sciences that are encompassed within the madhab, or within you can call them branches of fiqh. In other words, what would we call them? We in our institute, we call it masarul fiqhi wa usulihi. Like the path of studying fiqh has many sciences within it. And generally, I'm just going to talk to you about maybe 4 or 5 of them. So again, we have a good tasawwur of what you would expect to find in the madhab. So no doubt, fiqh requires all of the sciences of Islam. You have to have tafsir, you have to have good Arabic language, you have to have knowledge of hadith, what is authentic, what is not. You need all of it, right? To issue a ruling in Islam or study a ruling in Islam. You need to know all of the ahkam of fiqh, right? And the funun of Islam. You need to know about tafsir, you need to know hadith, you need to know seerah, you need to know Arabic language. But these typically are dealt with outside of the madhab. Why? Because pretty much they are dealt with together. In other words, it doesn't matter what madhab you are taking, what curriculum you are taking, you're still studying the same book of Arabic language, or to a greater or lesser extent. But what are the sciences that the madhab got involved in? That's my question. So the madhab doesn't really get involved in Arabic. You don't get like Hanafi Arabic, Maliki Arabic, Shafi'i Arabic. A little bit in usul al-fiqh maybe, but this is like dilalatul alfaz, what do words mean and things like that. You don't really get that. You don't really get tafsir. You don't get Hanafi tafsir and Shafi'i. Yes, you might get a mufassir who attributes themselves to the Shafi'i madhab, no problem. But you don't get necessarily a madhab that teaches you, a madhab fiqhi that teaches you tafsir. Allahumma, unless we're talking about tafsir al-ahkam, the rulings of the ahkam of the Quran, then in this case, yes, because it's fiqh basically. The person is going to teach you fiqh from the Quran. So they might teach you fiqh from the Quran upon the madhab of al-Imam Malik, fiqh from the Quran upon the madhab of al-Imam al-Shafi'i, for example, like that. But in general, hadith also, yes, certain scholars of hadith were Hanafi, others were Shafi'i, others were Maliki, others were Hanbali. But in general, it's not like the Hanafis don't take from Musnad al-Imam Ahmad, right? We can't, don't tell, la tahadithni min Musnad. I don't take anything from that Musnad. It's a Hanbali Musnad. They don't take it like that, right? It's outside of the madhab. Is that clear? Those topics, hadith, tafsir, seerah, ulum al-Arabiyyah, they are not, yes, the authors might be attributed to a madhab, but generally speaking, those books are not taught as part of the madhab fiqhi, so to speak. Does that mean the madhab fiqhi doesn't affect them? No, it does. It does affect them. Many times it does. In tafsir, you see an author who is Shafi'i. Go to the ayah, أَوْلَا مَسْتُمُ النِّسَاء. You touched a woman. What you're going to see? You're going to see this author, usually, he's going to support and use this ayah to validate the opinion of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala regarding breaking the wudu when you touch a woman who is ajnabiyah, for example. So here, yes, it's going to affect what people write, but you don't go and study a madhab fiqhi and sit studying tafsir al-Tabari. What do you study inside the madhab? There are actually lots, but I'm just going to talk about 6, 7, 8 topics that are typically taught. The first one is what we call al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, the branches of fiqh. And this furu' fiqhiyya is what people call fiqh. Yani they sometimes summarize it and call it fiqh. Yani I'm looking at al-adillatu tafsiriyya. I want wudu, how do I do it? I want to know how to make tahara. I want to know about marriage, divorce. Okay, al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, how is it organized? It's organized by dividing it typically into two. Into ibadat and mu'amalat. Ibadat are acts of worship. Mu'amalat are dealings and transactions. So in mu'amalat you find buying and selling, you find nikah, you find divorce, and in mu'amalat you find, in ibadat you find about prayer and you find about. So generally the ibadat, what do you expect to find in there? You expect to find the 4 pillars of Islam minus the first one, because the first one is aqeedah. So you're going to find as-salah, you're going to find zakah, you're going to find sawm, fasting, you're going to find hajj. Also usually, but not in every madhab, but usually you're going to find jihad also in ibadat. Some of them put it in mu'amalat. I'll be honest, I don't know in the books of the Ahnaf where they put it, but in some of the Shafi'iyya you see sometimes they put it in. Usually they put it in ibadat, an act of worship, but sometimes they put it in mu'amalat. Because it has an aspect of both. Like you're talking about, there are aspects of dealings with people and there are aspects of worship. In the issue of mu'amalat, you're going to find all the things that represent interactions between people. So you're going to find nikah, talaq, al-bay', buying, selling, marriage, divorce. And later on, some of them make it a third category. Some of them don't break it into two. Some of them put in the third one, they put al-hudud wa jinayat, punishments and crimes and punishments. And some of them put crimes and punishments, just they add it in the end, and some of them separate it. Different madahib, different authors within the madhab have there. But generally you're going to find acts of worship, you're going to find dealings, and maybe at the end you're going to find crime and punishment. That's what you're going to find in there. This is al-furu' al-fiqhiyya. In other words, what people call fiqh. Then we come to usul al-fiqh. We said usul al-fiqh, it deals with al-adillatul ijmaliyya. It deals with generic tools, which are evidences that can be used across the whole of the Quran and the Sunnah. Like we mentioned, al-amru yufid al-wujub. When you receive a command from Allah, the basic principle is that this command is fardun wajib upon you. It's fardun wajib upon you. Quick benefit on fard and wajib. There are istilahat, right? And this is actually a topic within the broader topic of fiqh, is you should take tarikh al-madhhab wa istilah al-madhhab. You should take the terminology of the madhab. For example, what does the word wajib mean in the books of the Ahnaf? It's slightly different to the word wajib in the books of what they sometimes call the Jumhur, the other three. Because generally in usul they tend to be somewhat close to each other. The Malikiyya, Shafi'iyya and Hanabila, they tend to use each other's books in usul, and they tend to. So the point is that the word might mean something different. So someone comes and says to you, for example, 2 rak'at before Fajr is wajib. طيب, first you need to understand, sorry, 1 second, what do you mean by wajib? Yeah? Is it fard? Is it sunnah mu'akkada? And that's, so the point is you need to know your terminologies, because you are going to get confused by the term wajib. Then make it even more complicated. Some of the madahib, especially the Hanabila, they might use the word wajib differently depending on what they're talking about. So for example, in Hajj, when they talk about something that is wajib, and the difference between al-rukn, al-arkan wal-wajibat, the things that you cannot make up for, and if you leave them you messed it up, and your ibadah is cancelled, and the things that you can make up for example. So there are all kinds of terminologies you should get used to, and that is its own topic. They sometimes call it istilahat al-madhhab, or sometimes they call it tarikh al-madhhab, the history of the madhhab, so you know, because it changes. This scholar, the early scholar, he uses this terminology. Have you ever seen, for example, the early Shafi'iyya, when they use the word makruh? Most of the time they mean haram. Vast majority of the time when they use the word makruh, they mean haram. But their terminology is, so they'll say like, zina is makruh. They don't mean makruh, yani, that if you do it, you don't get punished. So the point is that the word terminology could be different depending on the sheikh, depending on the time, depending on the book, and so on. From the sciences that we study within the science of fiqh is we study al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, the principles of fiqh. So now we're taking principles, qawa'id, generic principles that we can apply, but they are fiqh principles, and sometimes they call them qawa'id usuliyya because they sometimes argue, does this principle, is it really fiqh, or have you just stolen it from usul al-fiqh and put it in there? It happens sometimes. So you've got principles and rules you're learning. You've also got what some of them call, for example, tabaqatul ashab. Learning all the different people in the madhab. Who were they? For example, the madhab started with the imam. And this is a big misconception. Many people think that the madhab, for example, of Malik, is the opinions of Imam Malik. This is a misconception. Strike it out, cross it off. It's not even close. The madhab is attributed to the imam, but in reality, the madhab goes through marahil and tabaqat. For example, I give you a simple example. Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, has two very famous students, right? Qadi Abu Yusuf and Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, rahimahumullah ta'ala. Tayyib. Abu Hanifa has opinions and they took it from him. But then Abu Yusuf comes and makes different opinions to the opinions of Abu Hanifa. He comes across a hadith or he looks at the issue again and he changes his opinion. Then later on, this is just at-tabaqatul ula, the first level. Then comes another, then comes another, then comes another and another. And each one, the madhab is growing. Yes, not every person is so influential. For example, if we look at the Shafi'i madhab, the first thing we have is Imam al-Shafi'i split his life in two parts. Al-madhab al-qadim and al-madhab al-jadid. He has his old madhab and his new madhab. So al-Shafi'i is changing his madhab halfway through. So they'll sometimes say, وَفِي الْقَدِيمِ, yani in the old madhab he had this opinion, and in the new madhab he had this opinion. Then you have certain immense, great scholars who came, maybe way later in time. And those scholars were so influential that the madhab almost become a second imam for the madhab. For example, in the madhab al-Shafi'i, al-Rafi'i, and al-Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala. In the Hanbali madhab, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. Ibn Taymiyyah comes and he just, alas, a third of the madhab is gone. We brought a different aqwal now. The point is the madhab is a living thing. It's not Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad. It's them and their students and their students' students and their students' students and these key figures that come along. And then people will criticize you, oh, you took the Hanbali madhab, but you took it from Zad al-Mustaqni'. And Zad al-Mustaqni', it has a mail ila aqwal Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. Yani it goes towards Ibn Taymiyyah's preferences in the madhab, yani what he preferred. And you're not traditional, you need to go to al-Hajawi, or you need to go to, for example, the Maqdisiyin, you need to go to al-Muwaffaq ibn Qudamah, and you need to take his books because you've gone and so the point is the madhab is living. There's people coming all the time that are reviewing, and there's ikhtilaf inside the madhab. That's the next misconception, that the madhab is one qawl. Inside the madhab you have these hundreds, if not thousands of scholars. Of course they don't agree on everything, and so you have ikhtilaf And often the ikhtilaf is again brought back to key figures. For example, whose opinion do you take in this? Are you taking the qawl of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah in this issue, or are you going with the traditional qawl in the madhab that was before that? Which one are you taking? So this is important, Ikhwani. We know that the madhab, it doesn't stay stale. In fact, any madhab that stayed stale, the madhab died. Hold on, the madhab died. Does that mean there were more than 4 madahib? Ikhwani, the number of madahib fiqhiyya, yani no one can count it except Allah. Because in the beginning, we're going to cover the history. In the beginning, people had many scholars they went to. And people were taking from Al-Awza'i, and people were taking from many different scholars. It wasn't like everyone in the world was going to those 4 imams and their students. They weren't in the beginning. They had many different scholars, and those scholars went outside of the madhab. And some of the madahib kind of stayed semi-famous, like al-Zahiriyya. Ibn Hazm kind of revived the madhab of Dawood al-Zahiri. Rahimallahu al-Jami'. Ibn Hazm really, he like by himself, he took that madhab and he made it a 5th madhab. The point is, the madahib were many madahib. So if we ask ourselves a question, what made these 4 madahib last the test of time? We said it's not that Jibreel brought them down. What made them last the test of time? Now we're starting to get to the heart of the matter. The first thing is the khidmah that the students did for the madhab. The students did such a service to it. They wrote down what their shaykh said. It said Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala never wrote a book. It said that he didn't write a book in Aqeedah or in fiqh, and some of them attributed al-fiqh al-akbar to him, and some of them said it's still his students. His students wrote. The shaykh said, this is the opinion of our shaykh. Al-Shafi'i wrote, but again, he didn't write in fiqh. He wrote in usul. He has Risala, al-Umm. But he didn't write in fiqh itself. His students came along and they wrote for him. They did khidmah. Also, these madahib, they are in general, they are shamila, they cover all of the aspects of fiqh, all of the abwab of fiqh. Some of the scholars have opinions in some topics, but they don't have opinions in others. For example, the early tabi'een, the great scholars of the early tabi'een, you don't find them having an opinion in all of the abwab of fiqh, like, can I gather together the opinions? Even a sahabi like Abdullah ibn Abbas or Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, you cannot find for them an opinion in every single topic from the topics of fiqh. That's the second reason. The third reason is that fiqh is not one science. We said fiqh is a collection of sciences. We talked about usul al-fiqh, al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya. We talked about al-jam'u wal-farq, looking at the issues that appear to be similar but in fact are different, or issues where the same evidence is used and they're 2 different rulings and things like that. Al-khilafiyat, the differences within the madhab and outside of the madhab. So now once you've taken, you're like an expert, you know, like they say, sahibu nafas shafi'i, your blood is Shafi'i. And then you come and say, what now do you do? Now you need to know the khilaf that happened between Abi Hanifa and Shafi'i generally, because the other madahib there is khilaf, but it's, you can say a lot of it came between Imam Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala and Imam Shafi'i. So now, as in the madhab, not the imam, but the madhab. So now you're an expert in the Shafi'i madhab. You breathe Shafi'i madhab, and you know Shafi'i madhab like you dream it at night. But now you need to know the issues in which the Shafi'iyya and the Hanafiyya differed. So now you can understand the points where Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala was correct and the madhab al-Shafi'i is wrong. And yes, it happened. And many times Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala takes, and he goes back and he takes, for example, the opinion of Abu Hanifa in a matter, and he says, this is the madhab now. And he imported it into the Hanbali madhab. Why? All of this is because they're looking for the truth attached to the Quran and the Sunnah, and now you've taken, you know your madhab, but now you've got to go outside, khilafiyat. What's the difference between this madhab and why, what caused it, and so on. On top of that, you also you study, for example, al-Fatawa wa tanzil. You study the issue of Fatawa. So you listen to the sheikhs of the madhab, because now I've just studied theory. Okay, I'm really good. I know all Shafi'i books. I memorized Minhaj, and I started reading al-Majmu' and I'm just, I know Shafi'i madhab. But now there's a problem. I'm not a mujtahid, alim. I'm not a great scholar who's qualified to do ijtihad. So what do I need to do if I want to be competent in my fiqh? I need to now read the Fatawa of the great scholars of Islam. So now those great scholars, what did they give us their Fatawa? Because remember, a fatwa isn't really in the topic of al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, to be honest. It doesn't come under fiqh really. A fatwa is implementing fiqh upon the real world now. And usul al-fiqh and qawa'id fiqhiyya and all these sciences, now implement it for me. Real life. Someone comes and says, Ya Shaykh, I said to my wife, taliqa, 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 you're divorced, divorced, divorced. Ya Shaykh, am I divorced or I'm not divorced? Tayyib, I know the madhab, I know the qawl in the madhab, I know the usul, I know the qawa'id. But now I need to see the Shaykh. When people came to him, what did the Shaykh give the fatwa for it? Okay, what did you see about these sciences? Don't you see that they all go together? Could you imagine? Now sometimes people talk about, are you allowed to go out of your madhab? Could you imagine, generally speaking, if in the first day you started studying, you took the usul of Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, and you took the fatawa of Al-Qadi Hussein from the Shafi'iyya, for example, and you took Zadul Mustaqni' from the Hanabila in your furu' fiqhiyya, and then you went and took Maraqi Su'ud, the Nazm of Jam' al-Jawami' and the Maliki poet who wrote it. You are going to be, my brother, lost. Waqi', I'm not talking about what's allowed, what's not allowed. You are going to try it. You're going to be so lost. You're not going to know where you are. Because this doesn't match with this, doesn't match with this. It doesn't. Yes, they're all taken from the Quran and the Sunnah, no doubt. But they have things that are consistent. So one of the great benefits and blessings of the madhab is what? Consistency. Not always truly consistent, but as much as you can. The person talking to you about usul is taking fiqh from the same book as you. The person talking to you about qawa'id fiqhiyya is taking it from the same imams, not imam, because not one imam, the same a'imma as you. So you end up with something that is like a consistent curriculum that you can actually follow. Now my brothers, I want to highlight a point here. We are not, until this point, talking about ammat al-muslimin, the regular folk, al-awam. We're talking about studying the madhab now. Like, did you ever see Am who studied, al-jam'u al-farq, and like the differences in the opinions and khilafiyat between Abi Hanifa and Shafi'i? Nobody, no one from the regular Muslim studied this, right? But the people who are students of knowledge, is very, very hard. Two things are very hard. And I'm not shy. I'm going to get in trouble for saying it, but I'm not shy. It's two things are very, very hard. One is, it's very, very hard to do this without a madhab. Saraha. Yes, were there people who did it without a madhab? Yes. Historically, don't shoot the messenger. Yani. Historically, there were people, and a significant group of people, who said, we do not need this curriculum. We don't need these books. I'm going to go to the Quran, and I'm going to go to the Sunnah, and I'm going to go to the statements of the scholars in general, and I'm going to gather this knowledge. But the problem is, you're going to gather it in what? Al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, usul al-fiqh, al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, al-jam'u al-farq, al-khilafiyat, and you're going to take all of that stuff. And you're going to find it to be a lot of effort. And in the end, are you really going to produce something better than what is in the four madahib when you went yourself and you did what they did? You didn't do anything else. Don't think I went and I took the sunnah. You didn't. You just went and tried the same thing that they did. And you produced your curriculum, Muhammad Tim's curriculum. La madhabiyya, don't take your madhab. He took it from the kitab and the sunnah. You're going to find it ad'af, weaker than any of the madahib al-fiqhiyya. So it's very, very hard. People did it. Ibn Hazm, he supported it. Shawkani rahimahullah ta'ala supported it. Others, sometimes ashab al-madhhab even, people from the madhhab sometimes, really, people from each of the four madahib who became, well, those are the ones that, they get in trouble. They drifted away from the concept of the madhab. And they said, no, this has just gone too far. I want the people to go to the kitab and the sunnah. But generally speaking, it is hard and it's a lot of effort for very little gain. Is it possible? Ikhwani, I'm going to upset a whole bunch of other people as well. It has to be possible. It has to be qat'an, it has to be possible. Because otherwise, the luzum of that qawl is that Allah sent you down the Quran and gave you the sunnah and it's not enough for you. And that is a qawlun batil. We believe that is absolutely false. You cannot say that Allah gave the Quran and the Sunnah and the Quran and the Sunnah are not enough for us. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. Allahumma, unless you say one thing, the only argument you can bring, and people brought this argument by the way. Ibn Rajab famously, rahimahullah ta'ala, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he wrote a book where he staunchly defended you have to choose one of the four madahib. Lakin this, sarahatan, it has problems with it. And one of the problems is that it has lawazim, it has consequences to it. So the reality is the Quran and the Sunnah have to be enough. But also the only real argument you could give is if there was ijma' upon taking from the four madahib. And if there's ijma' that you're not allowed to go outside, and there is not ijma' on this. And I don't think even the most staunch follower of a madhab can argue that there is ijma' on this issue. Al-khilafu fihi mawjood. There is khilaf, there are scholars from all of the madahib who went further, deeper. So in reality, you don't have la ayah, wala hadith, wala ijma'. You don't have a ayah, nor do you have a hadith, nor do you have ijma'. Ibn Rajab proves this. He brings what? Qiyas. Ibn Rajab in his risala, where he tells you have to be one of the four madahib, his qiyas is upon the qira'at al-saba'. And you have to read a qira'ah from the qira'at. You have to read a qira'ah from the qira'at, so you have to take a madhab. This is qiyas ma'al fariq. Qiyas doesn't stand up to any scrutiny whatsoever. Rahimahullah ta'ala, the great Imam Hafid ibn Rajab. It's an amazing book, wallah. But in reality, the argument is, look, I don't have la ayah, wala hadith, wala ijma'. I don't have a ayah or hadith or ijma'. So it comes to like qiyas and, trying to prove something. And so in reality, I don't believe it is impossible for a person to have a tafaqquh without a madhab. But it's extremely hard and very, very few people did it. Very few people achieved it. And in general, very, very few people achieved this issue of getting tafaqquh, even those who supported it. Shaykhuna Shaykh Nasir al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, we know Shaykh Nasir, right? His introduction to Sifat Salat al-Nabi and how he, take it from the Kitab and the Sunnah. Like Shaykh Nasir, rahmatullahi alayh, came from studying the Hanafi madhab, rahimahullah ta'ala. But I'm not saying that the Shaykh would not have achieved what he achieved, but the point is that it's not easy to get that tafaqquh, that without, starting off with a curriculum. So what I'm here to say to you is that the madhab, ikhwani, it is a curriculum for studying fiqh and the sciences connected to fiqh. That's what it is. It's not wahi. Jibreel didn't bring it down. It's not ma'soom. It's not a matter that I don't pray in a Hanafi masjid and I don't marry a Shafi'i woman. This is how that when we hear the history of the madahib, it got to this point. وصل إلى درجة والله العظيم. There were 4 jama'at around the Kaaba, 1 Hanafi, 1 Maliki, 1 Shafi'i, 1 Hanbali. You're not allowed to go and pray behind the other one. What is this? What religion is this? I don't know this from Islam. But to understand the madhab as a curriculum which gives you a curriculum that is consistent, 3 things it's going to give you. A curriculum that is consistent, meaning that it's going to match. I open the book of Usul, that's the same as what I found there. The book of Qawaid, I found that there. It's going to match. Not completely, because we have ikhtilaf in the madhab, but it's going to match, roughly. The second thing is that it is tried and tested. And this is a good argument Ibn Rajab makes, and this is a true argument. And it is tried and tested. And it's you don't need to go and reinvent the wheel. And it's tried and it's tested. Many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people studied the books, graduated, got the fiqh, went on, alhamdulillah. Jameel. It's tried and tested. So it's consistent and it's tried and tested, and it goes with stages. It has gradual progression in it. So I can take a basic book in the madhab. For the Shafi'iyya, for example, I can start in Furu' al-Fiqhiyya with Matn Abi Shuja'. Then I can take for example, before Az-Zubad, I could take Az-Zubad after that. I could take Al-Yaqut al-Nafis before that. Then I could take Az-Zubad. Then I could take Umdat al-Salik. And then I can take Al-Minhaj. Each one of them gets a little bit more difficult. And there's things I can memorize. Az-Zubad is a manzuma, right? I can memorize the poetry for it. And then when I take the usul, I start with Al-Waraqat, Shafi'i author. I then go to, for example, before that, even if you end up with Fiyat al-Birmawi or something like that, and you ended up with Shafi'i, consistent, it's all matching up for me. Qawaid al-Fiqhiyya will take the same thing, and then Tabaqat al-Ashab, everything like that. So it's nice and consistent. It's going to take me in stages, and it's going to be tried and tested. But just like the madhab has many benefits, just like it has fawaid, many benefits, and it's a great blessing, there are also harms for the person who doesn't use it properly. From among the harms for the person who doesn't use it properly is al-i'rad an al-kitabi wa sunnah, leaving the Quran and the Sunnah. And by that I mean rejecting even a hadith, or turning away from it, or this ta'assub, like extremism with regard to holding on to the madhab. Like we said, 4 jama'at, we don't pray with you, you can't marry this one, and you're not allowed to pray in the masjid of this person, and this kind of stuff. This was never present in the time of the 4 Imams. Rather, it was probably even 500, 600 years after the Hijrah to a certain extent. Maybe before that there was some where you started to have real ta'assub in the madhab. You started to have real differences of opinion after the time of the tabi'een and then onwards. So you can say that until the middle of the 200s after the Hijrah, you didn't really have any ta'assub madhabi, like extremism in following the madhab. That's why you see the Imams are telling you, إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي, if the hadith is authentic, it's my madhab. Don't take from me, but look from where I took. All of these things are coming from the Imams. So until about 250 years after the Hijrah, you really don't have ta'assub. What causes the madhab to spread? To be honest, what causes the madhab to spread in reality is siyasa, politics. That's a fact, historical fact. What causes a madhab to spread is nothing other than politics. It's not this madhab was stronger, this madhab was weaker. Al-Imam al-Bukhari, can you imagine if his madhab was collected and documented? The madhab of al-Bukhari. Some of them call it madhab Ahl al-Hadith. And it's the fiqhi madhab of Ahl al-Hadith, some of them call it like that. But in reality, the reason a madhab became popular is because of politics. Someone was appointed chief judge, for example, Abu Yusuf, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his time was appointed the chief judge. Now as the chief judge, he appoints all the other judges. He's appointing Hanafi jurists, of course. So now the Hanafi madhab spreads because those in authority have appointed the senior judge is Hanafi, and he appoints his Hanafi judges to go with him, and then the madhab spreads. And then what happens 200 years later, you see the Shafi'i madhab in that country all over the place. What happened? Politics. Somebody changed position, he got taken out, someone died, someone else got put in, he chose the Shafi'i jurist. Now the Amir of that mantiqa, the Amir of that area tells everyone, you have to be Shafi'i, we're only doing qada, we're only doing judgments upon the Shafi'i madhab. So now the Shafi'i madhab spreads. And that's why if you look at the world today, recently, the Ottoman Empire, relatively recently, imposed the Hanafi madhab upon the courts, right? And so all of the countries that were under Ottoman rule, by and large, all of them had the Hanafi madhab. When Saudi was formed, Saudi Arabia was formed, again, the judges were from the Hanbali madhab. The Saudis are not that much of a fan of this whole no madhab thing. Yani. They're not on that. Yani. That comes from the Ahlul Hadith in like, for example, in India, some of them really supported it and stuff like that. But in terms of like, they're not a great fan of it. So they implemented Hanbali fiqh in the courts. Now when you go to Saudi, try to find someone who is teaching Matan Abi Shuja'. You look from the top to the bottom, you find some guy hiding in the corner. They don't tell anybody. يا أخي زاد المستقنع أخسر المختصرات كافي المبتدي, and they're teaching, they became the madhab in the country. Yes, there are people, alhamdulillah, there are people teaching the Haramain, other Madahib and things like that, but it's not widespread. Likewise, you look at the spread of the Maliki madhab in northern Africa. Many of those countries were Hanafi before that. What happened? Did they realize the Maliki madhab is much better? Or they got free copies of the Muwatta? No, it's not like that. They don't actually use the Muwatta, to be honest with you. They don't really refer to a Muwatta, which is a shame, because the Muwatta is an amazing book, but they don't really have a lot of attachment to it. But it wasn't that they got given out free copies of the Muwatta or something like that. It's quite simple. The politics changed, the judges changed, the Sultan changed, and the Maliki madhab spreads. It's very rare, I can't say never, but it's very, very rare that a madhab spreads because of its virtue or because of the quality of the teaching. Mostly, most of the time, it spreads because of politics. Because somebody got appointed as a judge, one of the sultan, he says that you have to follow this madhab, and it becomes taught to the people, and it becomes widely spread. There could be, of course, لِكُلِّ قَاعِدَةٍ إِسْتِثْنَاء, every principle has an exception. Yeah, for sure, you do find, وَلِلَّهِ الْحَمْدِ, times where a madhab is spread because people love the books and they became accustomed to it and so on. Yeah, you find that. For example, the spread of the Hanbali madhab, not that I'm defending my madhab, the spread of the Hanbali madhab in Damascus, in the Al-Madrasat Al-Umariyya, the Ibn Qudama, Muwaffaq ibn Qudama and Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, there was no sultan there. There was no sultan who enforced it. The Qadi was Shafi'i, Ibn Abi Usrun. He was a Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, the chief justice of the region. And the courts were Shafi'i. But when the Shaykh started teaching, a great alim with great knowledge, and he started writing books, so people came and learned the madhab. And it does spread through the quality of teaching sometimes. We don't say the quality of the madhab, but the quality of the teaching, and it does spread sometimes. Now, a lot of Hanbali madhab, a lot of it spread around the world simply because of, for example, a lot of people graduating from Saudi universities. It's not a bad thing, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a historical fact. People graduated from universities, and they came, and when they teach their classes, they teach what they know. They teach what their teacher taught them. They teach the Hanbali madhab, and so it's spread kind of online and things like that. So you do get the madhab sometimes spread because of teaching quality or availability of teachers, but a lot of time, particularly in the past, it was closely affiliated with politics, and who got appointed and who didn't, and who was in favor with the sultan and who didn't. And that's why it even reached a very silly phase. Honestly, it really did. A really, not praiseworthy phase, where the Sultan, for example, would bring the people to make fun of each other, like the Madahib, to attack each other for entertainment. So they would give you a mas'ala that is like really, really like, it's extremely hard to understand the reality of it. They would give a mas'ala, or they would give something that it's hard to understand, or something like really impossible to exist. They said like really silly things, like if a person breaks wind and they had something there, and then their wudu break when they open this thing, or they brought like just things that don't have any practical, it doesn't exist, but they brought it. Why? We bring, on the right hand side, we have the noble Ahnaf, and on the left hand side, we have the noble Shafi'iyya. Yalla, let's see. Fight it out with each other. But it wasn't praiseworthy. It wasn't for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And none of the scholars of Islam and the scholars of those madahib who were upon the Quran and the Sunnah, they didn't praise it. It was just people just arguing, like jadal, and just going back and forward. وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. Many times people just argue, and then they started to attack each other. And this is not what Islam was about, and it's not why the madhab was formed. And that's why this ta'assub, it came from around that stage. It came after 250 after the Hijrah, when the book started to be written. And of course, when you write an opinion, and then someone across the road writes a different opinion, you get a little riled up. You start to write a refutation of what they said, right? This guy is jahil, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And you write and you defend yourself. And then the other person comes and they defend. And so, okay, in the beginning, even 300, 400, it's okay. People, there's a little bit of stubbornness. There's a little bit of like, this is my madhab and don't talk to me. But it's not as bad until it gets to the stage where it becomes just partisanship, hizbiyah, if the word is the right, forming sects, and sectarianism and partisanship and ta'assub and blindness, and just everybody attacking each other and nobody respecting the Quran and the Sunnah before respecting the Imams. And this came, particularly, you can say it got worse from the fall of Baghdad. From 656 after the Hijrah or something like that. It really became like worse and worse and worse. I just want to talk about, and I need to take a break because 3 o'clock we need to give you guys a break. We've been sitting for a long time. I just want to talk about one fa'idah, or one benefit here. And this is, why do people differ? Because this is another thing we as Muslims, we really struggle with. Ikhtilaf, or al-khilaf wal-ikhtilaf. Some of them said al-khilaf is mamduh and al-ikhtilaf is madmum. Some of them said this, that the word khilaf just means, we didn't see quite the same way, and it's not necessarily blameworthy, but ikhtilaf, we went head on. Some of them said this, but in any case, there are 3 basic reasons why we have differences of opinion. The first one is the textual evidence, a difference in the actual evidence that we're going back to. Al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions in Jumma'ul Ilm, nobody has memorized all of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we know, if we just look at the hadith that were narrated, not memorized but narrated, we see that, for example, in general, Imam Abu Hanifa, he was considered to be muqil. And it's not correct to say that he was da'if al-hadith. I don't believe it's correct to say that he was weak in hadith. I think this is not correct. I don't think there's an evidence for it. Rather, he was muqil, and he didn't narrate a lot of hadith. And he didn't narrate large volumes and volumes and volumes of hadith, generally speaking. How many hadith he knew? Al-ilmu indallah. But he didn't narrate lots and lots and lots of hadith. Some of them were rough on him. They said da'if al-hadith, he wasn't strong. But it's not the reason. He was muqil. He didn't have so many hadith that he narrated. And there's nothing wrong with that. The second is, for example, Al-Imam Malik, we have Al-Muwatta. Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i is considered to be, and Imam Malik and himself, if you look at Ahmad and Al-Shafi'i and Malik, this is considered to be a silsila dhahabiyya in ilm al-hadith. Yani the highest standard of hadith is a hadith narrated by Ahmad, from Al-Shafi'i, from Malik, from Nafi', from Abdullah ibn Umar. They say, radiyallahu anhuma, they say this is the highest standard of hadith that exists. So they were mukthirun, and they said Imam Ahmad memorized alfi hadith, 1,000,000 hadith. And they were busy narrating hadith and going back and forward with hadith. They were busy with it. Not everybody has all of the hadith. Not Al-Imam Ahmad and not everybody else. That's why Imam Al-Shafi'i says to Imam Ahmad, you are more knowledgeable about hadith than me. So when you have a hadith, inform me about it, whether it is from Iraq or from Sham. Tell me about this hadith. Give me this hadith. If you know a hadith, give it to me. I haven't memorized every single hadith. Remember, when did Imam al-Bukhari write his Sahih? Imam al-Bukhari died 256 after the Hijrah, right? Generally, the books of hadith, apart from the Muwatta, Imam Malik is 190, whatever. Imam Malik of the Muwatta, the Kutub al-Sitta, all of them are written around this time, in the 200s, mid 200s, or the early to mid 200s after the Hijrah, in 240, 250, whatever. They're written at this time. That means that in general, neither did Imam Abu Hanifa, nor did Imam Malik, nor did really Ash-Shafi'i and Ahmad, because they are the ones Bukhari is narrating from, not the ones that none of them had, Bukhari and Muslim and Abu Dawud, Nasai, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and Rasat looking through it and saying, okay, this is my madhab from this hadith. They traveled, they memorized, they took narrations, they reported them, they tried their best. So this is the first reason you have ikhtilaf. One person knows a hadith, one person doesn't. And there's a misconception here which a lot of people have. And this misconception is, they think that it's impossible to know where your imam got his hukm from. This is ajib, yani. Like the books of the madhab are not like this, ikhwan. They are not. Generally, you go through and study in fiqh, you start off at marhalat al-ta'sis. Somebody just tells you, look, you pray like this. Put your hands on your chest, put your hands on your navel, whatever it is. Just your teacher says, this is where you put your hands. Khalas. Come tomorrow. Then you come to marhalat al-tadleel. Now your teacher says, put your hands on your chest because of the hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr. Someone else comes and says da'if, but that's coming later. But the point is, someone says put your hands on your chest because of the hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr. Now we have, radiyallahu anhu, now we have the hukm and we have the dalil. But the dalil on its own is not enough. Let me give you a beautiful example. It's my favorite example. I'm going to tell you, my brothers, a dalil. I'm going to talk about the issue, a very controversial issue. I'm going to talk about rafa' al-yadayn, raising your hands in the prayer. I'm going to give you a dalil. Now pay attention to this dalil. أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Don't they see the camel, how it was created? Is that not a dalil? Is it not an ayah? You say, Akhi Muhammad, I'm sorry. You brought me a dalil, but it's got nothing to do at all with rafa' al-yadayn. It's not even, it has no connection to it at all. So you brought me a dalil, but what's the problem here? I say, listen, Akhi, you asked me for a dalil and I gave you a dalil. You asked me for an ayah, a hadith, ijma, I brought you an ayah. What's your problem? You say, hold on, the problem here is what we call wajhul istidlal. How the person uses the dalil. Sah? How did this person, he got the dalil, but he used the dalil wrong. This dalil has no connection to the issue of rafa' al-yadayn, not for it, not against it. It has no connection to it at all. It could be a dalil for something else, but it's not a dalil for what we're talking about. So the problem here is the usage of the dalil is wrong. You then come to a stage which we might call marhalatu tahrir, where you start to, or before that, you come to a stage of what they sometimes call al-muqaran or al-muqarana, the issue of comparing other people's opinions. So now I got dalil. Okay, you with me? I've got dalil. I've got a qawl, I've got a dalil. I've got a qawl, I've got a dalil. I've taken a qawl in the issue of Raf' al-Yadayn. The fact that Abdullah ibn Umar, it's reported that he left it after he started it. And that people accompanied him for a year and they never saw him raising his hands. طيب. There's dalil, صح? Dalil. Wajh al-istidlal is correct, right? I used it, we used it with a valid dalil for a valid issue. But now there's an issue I need to know. And this comes back to the statement of Al-Imam Al-Humam Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, which he said, مَعْرِفَةُ مَا لَكَ وَمَا عَلَيْكَ. Now I need to know something else. I need to know what dalil is for me and what dalil is against me. Because someone else comes and says, I have 17 of the companions, or I have the number of the companions, all of them reported that the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands. Okay. But now I've got a problem. I had a dalil. I had wajh al-istidlal, right? I used it correctly. But my problem is what? My problem is now I'm learning the other guy's dalil. And maybe, I'm not here to talk about fiqh, don't worry about it. I'm just giving an example. Now I come to this issue, maybe his dalil is actually better than the dalil that I had. I had dalil, I used it correctly. And that's why Abu Hanifa describes fiqh. Ma'rifatu an-nafs, knowing your soul, ma laha wa ma alayha, knowing what is on your side and what's against you. In other words, you cannot be faqih until you know what the other guy has. Inside the madhab to begin with, because we don't want to dive in the deep end too early. Start, inside the madhab. Did all of the Shafi'i agree upon this, or there's a qawl? Do we go with Rafi'i and Nawawi? Where are we here? And then later on, outside of the madhab, because perhaps the truth in this issue isn't in the Shafi'i madhab at all. Even some masail, and I believe it's true, there are some masail, wallahu a'lam, that the truth is not in any of the four madahib. In other words, it's not a qawlun mu'tamad in any of the four madahib. It's rare, but it is true. You can get masail where it's not a qawl mu'tamad in the four madahib. And it's a qawl shadh. The Hanafi said it, but very few. Some Shafi'i said it, but very few. It's not considered to be acceptable, and it's not considered to be mainstream in the madhab, right? It's not considered to be, so it's qawl shadh. But you look at the evidence and you say, wallahi, the Quran, the Sunnah, and what they took, and I look at their wajh al-istidlal and their dalil, and wallahi, I personally believe that the rajih, the correct issue in this matter, is not a qawl mu'tamad in any single madhab. It's very rare, extremely rare, but I believe it's not impossible. Because we said Jibreel didn't bring down the madahib. And you're going to say, Akhi Muhammad, Allah yahdik. Akhi Muhammad, do you not believe in ijma'? Of course. But the four madahib are not ijma'. Ikhwani, if Abu Hanifa and Malik and Shafi and Ahmad agree on something, this is not ijma'. Ijma' is the agreement of the scholars of a particular time. It's the agreement of scholars of a particular time. Were there other scholars in the time of Abu Hanifa? There were. We have to also listen. Were there other scholars in the time of Imam Ahmad? There were. We have to also listen. Were there other scholars in the time of Imam Malik? So just because these four agree on something, it does not necessarily equate to ijma'. You might say ittafaqa al-madahib al-arba'. The madahib al-arba', they agreed on it. That's very good. And it's very strong, right? If all four agreed, it's very strong. I'm not saying it's not strong. But I'm saying just because the four of them agreed, it doesn't equate to ijma' necessarily. It might be ijma', it might not be ijma' consensus. Therefore, it might be possible the issue is not even present in it. So you must know ma laka wa ma alayk. And this, to some people, wallahi, it's very sad. They actually strip their madhab of this. They make it out that you, ayyuha talib, there is no way that you can know the evidence that your shaykh had. I'm not saying disrespect your shaykh. I'm not saying shaykh ma عندك dalil and you don't have any evidence and shaykh wallah I don't know where you brought this from in jaybik, your pocket. No, it's not disrespecting your shaykh. But eventually you will learn where did your shaykh take his opinion from. I don't know how anyone can study a madhab at an advanced level without knowing ma laka wa ma alayk. What evidence do you have and what evidence comes against you? Then you come maybe to the level of tahrir, where you yourself start to say, you know what it is? I incline towards the view of Al-Imam Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala in this issue. I personally, when I looked at what Shafi'i said, what was for him, what was against him, and I looked at what Malik said, what was for him, what was against. Remember, I've studied the madhab in detail for probably several years. I've taken from shuyukh, I've listened to what they said. But I start to have a stage of tahrir. I start to be able to start now to maybe have a preference. Now, we're not saying that I'm going and just rewriting the madhab and I'm, the Hanbali madhab, we're not Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. We're not going and changing around the madhab, not at all. But it is true that every student will eventually reach a level where they start to make tarjih in issues. They start to have preferences. That is why, Ikhwani, do you believe today, if I go to, for example, as an example, if I go to a Dar al-Ulum, for example, or something like that, and if I go and sit on study the Hanafi madhab there, for example, for those that teach that madhab, do you think that their scholars don't have tarjihat? No disrespect, honestly, do you think their scholars don't have preferences? Do you think that their scholars, that the scholars of Dar al-Ulum didn't choose some matters over others and prefer some opinions in the madhab over others? Look at the Fatawa of Shaykh Taqiyuddin. There's nobody, you cannot argue this. This is like a fact, historical fact. You have tarjihat. People will get to a stage where they will prefer some opinions and go away from some opinions. Some of those opinions they go away from will be the opinions of Al-Imam Al-A'zam, the great Imam, the Imam that is the founder of the madhab. How many opinions today in any one madhab do we believe actually came from mansoos, the nas of that Imam? Not as many as you would think. I don't want to put percentage. It could be more or less, but not as many as you think. And that actually responds a little bit to those people who are like, yeah, but my Imam is better than your Imam. Tayyib, no doubt. Al-Ain wal-Ras, we agree with you. Your Imam is better than my Imam. But the musibah is, you're not taking from your Imam, akhi. You're taking the tarjihat of the guy who leads the salah in the masjid. Don't talk to me about Imam Al-A'zam, Taqa bi Anas ibn Malik, or fulan. Don't tell me this great Imam, he met Anas ibn Malik, he met so many of the tabi'een, he was a great. Don't tell me this, because you're not taking what he said, you're taking this whole history of people. And some of that history is influenced by the very person who sits in front of you to teach you. Some might say no, because we have in our tradition, the people who teach the madhab to the younger people, they are also, strict upon the taqleed of their shuyukh. But still, no, not him, not your teacher, your teacher's teacher. Eventually you're going to get influences upon the madhab that didn't come, not from the Imam, not from the students of Imam, not from someone 200 years ago, from someone who lived, maybe is still alive today. And that's not bad. Just don't put the wool over your eyes and say that, I'm putting my footsteps in the feet of the great Imam. Before you didn't have a chance. Because, for example, if we look at the life of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, before you even put your footsteps where he stood, Abu Yusuf came and took his footsteps away and put them somewhere else. So you don't have the ability to do that. You don't. So yes, there's great Imams. We love our great Imams, rahimahullah ta'ala. But don't put the wool over your eyes and tell yourself that I am the shadow of this Imam. In reality, you are influenced by all the people who came after that Imam. All of them. Until your teacher who sits in front of you, who is going to make what? tarjihat. He's going to say to you, this is the rajih in the madhab, this is al-qawl al-mu'tamad indana, this is our opinion, this is what we believe to be correct. And over time, so people grow. One mistake people have is to believe, and I believe it's a mistake, and it's controversial, but I believe it's a mistake, is that people believe that the issue is taqleed or ijtihad. Sarah, me personally, I'll be honest with you, I don't believe that that is the waqi'. I believe that that's wrong from, it might be theoretically correct, but I believe in reality it doesn't exist. Nobody, for example, was muqallid, haqq al-taqleed, yani proper taqleed, taqleed. And then they woke up one morning, and after they had their cornflakes, they became mujtahid. هذا لا يوجد يا أخي. Doesn't happen. Rather, they grew day by day, mas'ala by mas'ala. We told you, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he went to Hammad ibn Salama rahimahullah, and he asked him about seeking knowledge. And he told him, تعلم في كل يوم ثلاث مسائل. Learn 3 masail every single day. ولا تزد, and don't do anything more than that. Until he became an imam and a faqih that the people used to point with their fingers when he would walk past. Look at the imam. The point is, it's a gradual approach, right? When you start, you do start with taqleed, yani haqq al-taqleed. Yani. Your teacher says, put your hands on your chest, sami'na wa ata'na. You put them on your chest. Ya akhi, you don't know la Bukhari wala Muslim, you don't know mustalah, and you don't know usul, and you don't know anything. Your teacher said, do it. That's okay. Because what are you doing? You took the person who is most qualified that you could access. You didn't go phone Imam Malik. Imam Malik. You know, in the Muwatta, you have the hands on the chest, but I see your followers with the hands down by the sides. Can you just help me out here, Sheikh? Nobody did this. What you did is you went to the most knowledgeable person you had access to, who's teaching you fiqh. And what did you do? You took fiqh from him. In the beginning, you just got tasawwur al-masail. You understood like tahara, wudu, okay, types of water, okay, using water, getting rid of najasat, okay, making wudu. All right, what do you do with the extra water in wudu? Like, you just got an idea of what fiqh is. And then you start to grow and grow and grow. You start to get dalil. And all of the madahib, I don't know, wallahi, it's dhulm upon people to say that the madhab doesn't give dalil. I do not know any madhab which doesn't give dalil. He's going to bring you dalil. He's going to bring you, in fact, they give dalil like they shout it from the rooftops because they want to show that their opinion is stronger. This is my evidence, and I have this, and I have this, and I have this, and I have this. Sah. So, in reality, you're going to start getting dalil slowly. Then you're going to start realizing that all of your teachers don't have the same opinion. And that our beloved Sheikh Abdullah has a different opinion from our beloved Sheikh Abdurrahman. And they're both on the same madhab from the same books. But you realize there's ikhtilaf within the madhab. And as you grow, you realize that there's a world outside of your madhab. And you realize that wallahi it's true. That the prayer of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wallahi inni la uqsim billah, it does not exist in any madhab completely. And I think that Shafi'i has quotes like this, Ahmad has quotes like this. There is no single madhab that gathers all of what the Prophet ﷺ used to do perfectly. So you realize there's a world outside your madhab. You know, you've been taught, you've grown up in the Shafi'i madhab, you've been taught just keep away from those Hanafis guys, they're dangerous. Don't take from them ashab al-ra'i. We don't take from our, they're intelligent, they're using their opinions and reasoning. You're from ashab al-hadith, don't take it from them, don't look at their books. But after a while you reach a level where you realize that guys, they got some things right that the others got wrong. And you start to say, okay, I'm now qualified through my teacher, my sheikh, to take some of the khilafiyat, the differences between the madahib, or what they call al-fiqh al-muqaran, comparative fiqh, and start to learn ma laka wa ma alayk. Okay, here you are flying the flag of the madhab, and then you look at all your dalil, and you now have to look at the other person's dalil, and you have to be honest with yourself for Allah, sincerely for Allah. Is my dalil stronger or their dalil stronger? And sometimes in the beginning you don't feel confident. You're like, look, I'm on safe ground here. I'm following great imams of the past, so my feet are on the ground. I'm happy. So you're okay with it. But as time goes on, you get a little more confident, you grow a little bit, you get a little bit more knowledgeable, a bit more usul, more study of hadith, more study of ayat. And if you're being true to yourself and honest to yourself, you will sometimes have moments where the sunnah becomes clear to you. And Shafi'i reported, ijma', consensus. Bear in mind, who did Shafi'i meet? He met the students of Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. He was the student of Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i. He narrated hadith from Imam Malik. And he was the companion of Imam Ahmad. So when a Shafi'i narrates ijma', this is the ijma' of the students of Abi Hanifa, as well as the ijma' of Shafi'i himself, as well as the ijma' of Malik and Ahmad. He said, ajma'a al-ulama. The scholars have consensus. أن من استبانت له سنة عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The one that the sunnah becomes clear to a person, it is not allowed for them to leave it for the speech of anyone, كائنا من كان, whoever they are. Consensus. He didn't say this is only for the students, only for the teachers. Ijma', that if the sunnah is clear to you, this is the key word, istabanat, it becomes clear to you, haram for you to take anyone else's speech other than the Prophet ﷺ. However, the sunnah doesn't become clear on day one. Are we agreed? Yani, like the first day you study and you're like, yeah, I know, like you see some people, you do, yani, a little bit of ta'assub on issues, I take the opinion of our Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala on the issue of the niqab. Like until now, akhi, you don't know not the hadith, nor the level of the hadith, nor do you know the principles of it, nor do you know the fiqh of it, nor do you know what the evidence of the other person is. So, before you shout from the rooftops, you need to know, you need to grow a bit. But as you grow in your learning of Islam, there are times when the sunnah becomes clear to you. And there are times, and when the sunnah becomes clear to you, you owe it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you do not leave the wahi for the opinion of people. And that's progress. It's not something that is like in everything. Some of the scholars, As-Suyuti, I think rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, 40 years I took a mas'ala, I didn't know what the rajih in the mas'ala was. Something like that. He said 40 years, around 40 years. I had an issue, I had no idea what the sunnah was in it. I have no idea. So the reality is, as it becomes clear to you, you will take the sunnah, because your heart is attached to the sunnah. Even inside your madhab, before everyone gets angry and says you're telling them to go out the madhab again, before that, even within your madhab, you will see that one great scholar has one opinion, one has the other. But for you soon, the sunnah becomes clear to you and you say, yeah, I'm with this one. It happens. It's natural growth of knowledge that happens. Over time, the student becomes more and more and more and more knowledgeable. Will they ever reach the level of the mujtahid? In the first place, the scholars disagree whether ijtihad mutlaq even exists today. And some of them say there is no absolute ijtihad. In reality, everyone who gives a fatwa today, even from their own ijtihad, they give it from one of the scholars of the past. They bring, like Abu Hanifa said this, I believe Abu Hanifa was correct, I believe Shafi'i was correct in this, but they don't bring you something from themselves. But in reality, even if we say the door is open, which is, I believe, has to be the stronger opinion, because in reality you have nawazil, you have new issues, you have calamities that happen where people have to make ijtihad. So I don't think ijtihad is closed. But whatever it is, very few people reach the level of al-ijtihad, where they don't tell me what any imam said, just give me the ayah, don't tell me the tafsir, I'm going to make it all for myself. Very few people reach that level. Some of the scholars said nobody reached that level in our time. I don't think that's quite true, but it really very, very few people reach that level. But you do start to become more familiar with the evidences and more comfortable and more likely to prefer something over something else. There's a beautiful book, wallahi, I believe everybody should read it, and I'm sure there's some people who would not like me to say this. But wallahi, really, this is, if you want to know, you always get told off, you know. You Salafis don't like the Imams. We do, you know it. You don't like the 4 Imams. Let me quote you from Raf'ul Malam. Who wrote Raf'ul Malam? This book, Raf'ul Malam, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. He wrote it to defend the 4 Imams. It's a book defending the 4 Imams. It's called Raf'ul Malam. He said, let it be known that there is no one from the Imams who have been accepted by the Ummah, meaning the great Imams of Islam, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmad, whoever deliberately intended to go against the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in anything from his sunnah, large or small, they were without doubt agreed upon the obligation of following the Messenger, and the fact that every one of the people has some of their statements accepted and others rejected except the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, if an opinion of one of them is found while there's an authentic hadith which opposes it, there must be a reason why they left that hadith. Ya salam. Ibn Taymiyyah is defending it. He's saying if you saw there was a hadith, an authentic hadith, and you saw Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala give a fatwa which opposes a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, know that there has to be a reason why the Imam did it. No way did he do it to oppose the Sunnah. No chance. He has to have had a sabab, a reason why he did it. There has to be a reason. Because not one of those Imams ever deliberately intended to oppose the Sunnah in anything large or small. He's writing this book to defend the Imams. When the people say that the Imams went against the Sunnah, the Imam opposed the Hadith, he didn't. But there's an important issue here. Very important issue. So, for example, it might be the Imam never got the Hadith. It might be that the Hadith had a weak chain when it reached him and an authentic chain when it reached somebody else. Or it might be that the Imam didn't remember the Hadith at the time. It happened to Umar radiallahu anhu that sometimes he forgot a Hadith. There are examples in the Sunnah of Umar forgetting a Hadith that was said to him. And then later he's reminded by one of the Sahaba and he takes it. So in any case, it's important to note something very important. Even though the Imam is excused, even though the Imam is excused, the Imam gets one reward. Even if he gets it wrong, he gets one reward. It doesn't mean that we are all excused with the Imam. Does that make sense? This might be difficult, but try to follow me on this. The Imam is ma'dhur, excused. Why? Because he's mujtahid, he's deserving of ijtihad. And the mujtahid, إِذَا أَصَابَ, if he gets it right, فَلَهُ أَجْرًا, he gets 2 rewards. وَإِذَا أَخْطَأ فَلَهُ أَجْرٌ وَاحِدٌ, he gets 1 reward. So the Imam either got 2 rewards for getting it right or 1 reward for getting it wrong. You, Ya Abdullah, come, call it 1300 years, 1350 years later. And the Sunnah becomes clear to you in a matter and you say, no, because if I follow Imam Malik, I'm going to get 1 reward. Now the 1 reward is for him, not for you. It's for him that he tried his best with what he had and he came to the truth. And you must also try your best with what you have. You must also try your best. So you also cannot hide behind that shield and say this. Al-Shafi'i said, أجمع الناس على من استبانت له سنة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لم يكن له أن يدعها لقول أحد من الناس. The quote of Al-Shafi'i that I mentioned to you earlier. Second reason why the scholars differ, I'm trying for the break. Second reason why the scholars differ, they differ because of al-lughatul arabiyyah. So now, Imam Malik quotes an ayah, and Imam Ahmad quotes an ayah, and the two of them differ about it. It's an ayah, there's no issue of authenticity, there's no issue of the hadith didn't reach them. They both quote the ayah, and they differ about it. For example, وَإِن كُنتُم مَرْضَى أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ أَوْ جَاءَ أَحَدٌ مِّنكُم مِّنَ الْغَائِطِ أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. Surah An-Nisa. If you have touched a woman and you don't find water, provide tayammum with clean earth. In here, the Jumhur, which here are the Hanafiya, the Malikiya, and the Hanabila on one side. And on the other side, Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala wa rahimallahu al-jami'. Both of them quote the ayah. Both of them say, my evidence is the ayah. One of them says that touching the hand of a woman or touching a woman breaks your wudu, and the others say it doesn't. Both of them quote the same ayah. It's no chance they didn't memorize the ayah, they all memorized the ayah. No chance they didn't remember the ayah, they both quoted the ayah. What's the problem here? Al-Lughatul Arabiyyah. The Arabic language. The word lamps in the Arabic language can mean to touch, and it can mean marital intimacy. Both. And both meanings are found in the Quran. So the Quran uses the word lamps for both. So now you can't say, okay, Arabic, but the Quran only uses it for this. No, the Quran uses it to mean marital intimacy, and the Quran also uses the same word to mean touching. So now the basic difference, there are other reasons, they're supporting evidences, they're not just mentioning one ayah, but here the real difference is Al-Lughatul Arabiyyah, the Arabic language came with both meanings. وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوء. 3 quru. The word qar came in the Arabic language meaning al-hayd, meaning menstruation, and the word qar came in the Arabic language meaning at-tuhr, meaning purification. So the scholars differed among themselves. Both of them quoted the ayah. One of them said quru means 3 periods of purity, and one of them said 3 menstrual periods, because the word qar comes with both meanings in the Arabic language. So the point is this. And then the third reason they differ is because of the usul. The third reason they differ is because of usul al-fiqh and al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya. That they have different usul. For example, as I said, we are not the world's greatest expert in the usul of the Ahnaf, for example. But one of the things we see a lot in their books of fiqh from the point of view of usul is the issue of what happens when the rawi, the narrator of a hadith, doesn't act upon the hadith that he narrated. طيب? A narrator, Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhuma, or someone else, narrates a hadith, but then his companions narrate that Abdullah ibn Umar did not practice this hadith himself. He narrated it, but he didn't practice it. What I saw, and I'm not, forgive me for the brothers who are expert in the madhab, I'm not an expert, but as we saw, that generally speaking from the usul of the Ahnaf in this issue is that they will go with the action of the rawi rather than the hadith which is narrated. They will take that the action of Abdullah ibn Umar here supersedes his statement, which is a sensible position. It's not crazy to say that someone narrated a hadith and then later on he didn't do what he narrated, and so we follow what he did rather than what he said. I'm sure it's more complicated than that. I'm sure there's khilaf on it. I'm sure there's many books of usul written about it. But just a simple point. Other scholars, they said, no, he might have forgotten the hadith. He might have had a reason why he didn't implement it, like some sickness. It might be the narrations about him leaving it are weak. So no, we don't really mind if the rawi leaves the hadith. To us, it only matters the hadith is authentic. We're not interested whether the narrator left it or didn't leave it. And others, other than Abdullah ibn Umar, did it as well. So we're not, from our point of view, our usul, we are not really concerned if a narrator stops practicing the hadith that they narrate. The Shafi'iyya, in the issue of saddu dhara'i, stopping the things that lead to haram. The Shafi'iyya, they said, generally speaking, the Shafi'i usul, that unless the dhari'ah is mansusa, it's specifically mentioned that it's a means to the haram, we don't prohibit it. We don't prohibit it. We don't prohibit something because I personally think it's dangerous. We only prohibit it if the danger is mansus. It's specifically mentioned that there is a danger in it. And the dhari'ah here, the path that leads to the danger, we are not going to accept this as being dangerous or prohibited unless the danger you're scared of the dhari'ah here is mansusa. It's specifically mentioned in the text. Again, generally speaking, we're not taking usul fiqh today, but just as an idea. Others said no. If it is understood, if we come together and we see that there is a danger in something and it's leading to haram, we consider it to be haram, even if that specific haram is not mentioned in the text. In general here, the issue, there's a series of books that you take called Takhrij al-Furu' ala al-Usul. How do you apply usuli principles to fiqhi rulings? How do you take these principles and apply them to rulings? There's a science called Takhrij al-Furu' ala al-Usul, applying the fundamental principles to the subsidiary matters. And he taking the matter like, for example, the issue of wudu, and applying the usul of the madhab to that issue. It's called Takhrij al-Furu' ala al-Usul. So here we understood that these are the reasons why people differ, and I would highly recommend the book Raf' al-Malam, so you will have your proper respect for the scholars of Islam, and you understand why those scholars differed with each other, and you understand that doesn't mean, what's the misconception? It doesn't mean that both of them are right. There are two types of ikhtilaf. Ikhtilafu tanawwu' and ikhtilafu tadad. Ikhtilafu tanawwu', it means two scholars differed, but their opinions are not contradictory. One scholar and another scholar differed about something, but their opinions don't clash with each other. For example, they said you can do this or do that. It's permissible for this or that, or they said this is preferred but this is allowed. But what do you do when there's tadad? Yani they really clashed with each other. One said halal, one said haram. In this case, one of them is right and the other one has to be wrong. But ultimately, as we said, as we grow in knowledge, the sunnah becomes clear to us. So our allegiance is to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and not to the particular madhab or the particular sheikh or the particular school that taught me this particular matter. I don't know about you, but I need a break by now. So I think wallahi we should take a break. We were supposed to take a break like an hour ago. But wallahi, I told you, I think we taught, it's like 26 hours we taught this topic. So I'm not going to give you 26 hours, don't worry. We're supposed to finish by Asr. I will do my best in the break to try to sort things out and try to, highlight some things and whatever. But inshallah, everyone's listening to the general message, right? You're getting the general message, the role of the madhab. What we do need to talk about is the role of the madhab for the awam. That's going to come after the break. How does the regular Muslim who is not studying fiqh at all, to what extent are they taking from the madhab or not? That also has to be, it has to be discussed. هذا والله أعلم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Ikhwani, we'll take a break for, call it 10 minutes inshallah. 10 minutes, stretch your legs. Inshallah. What we can do is we're ready to replace the battery in this. This is the second set of batteries. So I have a new battery in this one. Just two. Jazakallah khair. Okay. If we can ask all of the brothers to come back, inshallah, we're going to resume our discussion bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So inshallah ta'ala, this is how the program is going to go for the next 45 minutes inshallah. We're going to finish our topic in the next, adhan is 4:30 I believe here, and the salah would be 4:45. So we might go between the adhan and the iqamah a little bit, but we're going to, inshallah, finish our topic by then, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. What we will then do is break for Asr prayer, and after Asr we will have Q&A. Now, my encouragement to the brothers and sisters would be, where possible, I have no problem with the brothers coming to ask questions and privately, no issues, but I just feel like sometimes your questions are so good and you can benefit everybody. So, bring your questions on paper, and after Asr we will answer, and then whatever we don't answer on paper, we should have a little time just to pass by some of the brothers who had some questions. So let's just talk a little bit about the stages of development of the Madahib. In the beginning, the Prophet ﷺ, he was the only teacher. There was no other teacher except him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then those that he appointed as teachers, like Mu'adh bin Jabal radiyallahu anhu. And in the end of this, at this time, in the time of prophethood, it's the time of revelation, right? There is no, or almost no, ikhtilaf. Almost no. You can't say none. Sometimes the Sahaba were away, sometimes, but there is almost no serious difference of opinion. Why is that? Because any difference of opinion that becomes serious, where are they going to go back to? Back to the Prophet ﷺ during his life. O Messenger of Allah, so and so did this and so did that. Which one of them is right? So the differences of opinion among the Sahaba were extremely, extremely small. There's another difference, another reason why the differences were so small. And this is that in reality the Muslim nation was quite small, and the people in it were limited in number. In this time, how was fiqh derived? How did we derive fiqh? From the Quran and the Sunnah, from السنة القولية والفعلية والتقريرية. The sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ said, the sunnah the Prophet ﷺ did, and the sunnah that he approved of. Disputes and questions were brought before the Prophet ﷺ. He answered the questions and he settled the disputes. In terms of fiqh, where did fiqh flourish more, Makkah or Medina? In Medina. And that is because in Makkah, it was primarily the time of tasheeh al-i'tiqad, correcting people's beliefs, and then it went into a stage where along with the beliefs there was also the aspects of fiqh and rulings and so on. Did the Prophet ﷺ teach fiqh or usul al-fiqh? No doubt he did, but he didn't teach it in a separate lesson. He didn't come and say, Ashabi, my dear companions, today I'm going to teach you usul fiqh. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ taught us usul. And qawa'id, for example, he taught us the qa'ida la darara wa la dirar. There should be neither harm nor should harm be reciprocated. But there were no dedicated fiqh lessons or dedicated usul or qawaid. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ taught according to the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him. And from these statements of the Prophet ﷺ later on, the scholars extracted principles. الضرر يزال تدفع أعلى المفسدتين بارتكاب أدناها وأدناهما. And you get rid of the big evil by taking the smaller one. These things came from what the Prophet ﷺ said. And this was the best of all of the times in which fiqh was taught. And everybody agrees, nobody disagrees, that the best time to study fiqh was from the Prophet ﷺ. And there is no disagreement on that from anybody. That the best time that you could have ever studied fiqh was from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But there's a benefit I want to take from this. That the goal in fiqh is not jam'ul aqwal. But the goal in fiqh is ma'rifatul rajih wal amali bihi. Wal amalu bihi. That's the goal. So the goal in fiqh, by the dalil of the Sahaba, the goal in fiqh is not to gather everyone's different opinion. I know the opinion of this imam and this shaykh and this student, and I know all of the different. That's not the goal. The goal is to know what is correct, and the goal is to act upon it. And we're going to come back to that point when we talk about the regular person. Because our regular people, the ammat al-nas, they're not studying the books of the madhab typically. Maybe you teach Matan Abi Shuja' in the masjid. You teach Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat, or you teach something, a matan. But it's not common, right? Generally in the masjid, the teacher just teaches people what to do, right? He teaches this how you pray. Everyone, we're going to learn how to make wudu. He doesn't, quote the books and teach the books like that. He just teaches the people. In this, is the teacher wrong? When our shaykh, for example, stands in the masjid and says, my brothers, I'm going to show you how to make wudu. And he shows how to make wudu. Is he wrong because he didn't open Matan Abi Shuja' and start, or Safinatun Najah and start reading from it? No, he's not wrong. Because the goal here is ma'rifatul rajih. In the Hanafi madhab, that you will see the emphasis upon the madhab among the regular people. I don't mean that it's not common in the others, but it's you see a lot of emphasis on really learning the madhab, and trying to take the regular person at least into the basics of fiqh from the madhab. And it's true in other places as well. Certain Shafi'i places, countries where they really try to but generally speaking, whatever it is, that regular person is not memorizing the matan, nor are they studying it in detail. They are just, the teacher is a qualified person, and the teacher shows them how to pray, how to fast, what to do, and so on. And that's where they're taking their fiqh from, and there's nothing wrong with that. From the evidence that this is what the Sahaba radiallahu anhum did. And this is what happened in the time of the Khulafa al-Rashidin, and all the way up until maybe 250 years after the Hijrah. That's what people did. So there's nothing at all wrong with a teacher teaching people according to that teacher's knowledge. Now here comes the question. Should that teacher stick to his madhab? In reality, that's the teacher's choice. The teacher is qualified. If the teacher feels that the best way is to take the people through the madhab, and if the teacher and then make tarjih, make preferences and select opinions, or if the teacher feels that it's best for the teacher to gather their personal, way of doing things, at the end of the day, that's why you have qualified teachers. There should not be any issue with this. This leads us to a question before we talk about the second stage, which is al-intisabu ila al-madhhab. Someone says, I am Muhammad Tim al-Hanbali. Is it allowed? Here we differentiate between two types of intisab. We differentiate between mujarrad al-intisab, just taking the name. I studied Hanbali books, my teacher was Hanbali teacher, and now I've taken that name as as something to show that I had studied from that madhab, and maybe when I write a book, people can understand my opinions in light of the madhab, Like it's nice when you're reading, pick up a book of hadith, Bulugh al-Maram, for example. Al-Imam al-Hafidh ibn Hajar al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala. No problem, and it tells me, that's why he left that hadith. It tells me and that's okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. But where does intisab go wrong? Where does it go wrong for someone to say that I am whatever, Maliki or whatever? The first is at-ta'assub lil-imam. Like extremism and partisanship when following the imam. The second is ash-shiqaqu fil masjid. See? Yep, back on the same stream. So we should be, inshallah, if you have a check of it, it should be on the exact same stream. So we didn't break anything, guys. We didn't add anything. You haven't missed anything. If you're on the live stream, you haven't missed anything at all. So we were talking about when does intisab become haram. We said ta'assub, breaking people up in the masjid, insulting the other madahib, taking away from their honor and their right, or seeking superiority over other people because of al-madhhab al-fiqhi. This is something that is not praiseworthy. But if a person has intisab to a madhab and they are not blindly following their imam, as we quoted Imam Shafi'i's ijma' on the issue, they are not insulting other people, they're not breaking up among the Muslims, they're not seeking superiority and to look down on other people, then there is no issue with this intisab. It doesn't hurt anybody. The question which might be perhaps more, I don't know if we could say, the question that is perhaps more important, or the question that is perhaps more, it's perhaps the question that needs to be asked is, does this intisab really benefit the regular Muslim? I mean, does it mean anything? Okay, he comes today and he says, my name is, for example, my name is Abdullah al-Shafi'i. I say, Abdullah, masha'Allah, please tell me, where did you research or where did you reach in the books of the Shafi'i madhab? He says, Shafi'i, I never took anything. I just want to be with the Shafi'iyya. فَوَصِيَّتِي لِلنَّاسِ أَن يَتَشَفَّعُوا. I took the advice of the scholars and I just want to be Shafi'i. I would say, and this is just my personal opinion, I would suggest to you that this intisab, it really doesn't have any meaning to it. In reality, it doesn't actually mean any real thing, to be honest with you. Like, what does it mean? Like the person, he doesn't have ta'assub, he's not extreme, he's not insulting other people, he's not seeking to look down on them. He's just a regular guy. I just come to the masjid and pray. Ya akhi, he's going to go against his madhab 200 times in a week. Because he hasn't studied it. He doesn't know the madhab, the limits of the madhab. He's just, in reality, all he can do is to take the opinions of his teacher. And if his teacher is staunch on a madhab, he'll be staunch on the madhab. And if his teacher is a bit more relaxed, he'll be relaxed. But he's a regular guy. So there's nothing wrong with his intisab. It doesn't hurt you anything. But it also doesn't benefit the regular person in a real way. It's nothing wrong, but it doesn't really bring them something that actually has